January 31st, 1993. Amarillo, Texas. A quiet suburban neighborhood. The kind of place where the sound of children's laughter blends with the distant hum of cars on the highway. Inside one modest brick home, uneaten sandwiches sat neatly wrapped on the counter. The washing machine churned, filled with half-finished laundry. The television flickered in the background, its glow casting shifting shadows across the living room. But the man who had prepared the food, folded the laundry, and left everything in order, attorney David Glenn Lewis, was gone. By the next evening, more than 1,600 miles away, a man was struck and killed in a mysterious hit-and-run on the side of a highway in Washington state. For over a decade, authorities didn't realize they were looking at the same person. How did a respected Texas lawyer vanish in the middle of his daily routine, only to resurface hours later, across the country, under circumstances so strange they defy explanation? Before we begin, I want to thank my amazing viewers and subscribers for your support through your likes, shares, and comments. Your engagement helps make these stories more meaningful. If you're new here, be sure to hit that subscribe button and join our growing community of true crime enthusiasts. David Glenn Lewis was born on November 3, 1953, in Borger, Texas. Those who knew him describe him as intelligent, disciplined, and deeply dedicated to both his work and his family. By his late 30s, David had built a career as a respected attorney in Amarillo. He specialized in family law and was known among colleagues for being methodical, calm under pressure, and, above all, ethical. Former clients would later say that David had a way of balancing professionalism with empathy, making people feel heard even in the most difficult legal battles. At home, David was a devoted husband and father. His wife, Karen, described him as a man of quiet routines. He cooked simple meals, kept the house orderly, and doted on their young daughter, Lauren. He wasn't flashy, nor was he reckless. He lived within his means, enjoyed community life, and was deeply active in the church. Friends recall that his idea of relaxation wasn't wild trips or spontaneous adventures, but family dinners, barbecues with neighbors, and Sunday afternoons spent watching football. To everyone around him, David embodied stability, which makes what happened in January of 1993 all the more difficult to reconcile. The weeks leading up to David's disappearance held subtle signs of unease. Colleagues noted he seemed preoccupied, less engaged than usual in court cases. At home, Karen later remembered that David sometimes appeared distracted, as though his mind was elsewhere. Still, there were no open conflicts, no major disputes, nothing that screamed crisis. But beneath the surface, David carried stress. He was handling sensitive legal work, including cases involving influential community members. Some friends speculated he may have felt pressure or even threats related to his career. Financial records showed no instability. He wasn't struggling with debt, and there were no large, suspicious withdrawals before his disappearance. Whatever haunted David, it wasn't visible on paper. January 30th, 1993, passed like any other Saturday. He went about normal tasks, made small talk, folded laundry. He gave no indication that the next 24 hours would become one of the most confounding mysteries in Amarillo's history. On January 31st, 1993, Karen and young Lauren left the house to visit relatives. David stayed behind, reportedly planning to catch up on chores. When they returned that evening, the scene was frozen in unsettling normalcy. The house smelled faintly of detergent, laundry tumbling mid-cycle. Sandwiches rested untouched on the kitchen counter, bread softening as hours passed. The TV was on, tuned to familiar channels, as though someone had just stepped away for a moment. But David wasn't there. His car remained in the garage. His keys, wallet, and driver's license were missing. But oddly, his wedding ring and watch were left behind on the dresser. It was as if he had prepared to leave, but only temporarily, expecting to return. Only he never did. What happened between the time David's wife left and when she returned remains a black hole of unanswered questions. By early the next morning, David had somehow traveled or been transported over 1,600 miles to Washington state. On February 1, 1993, Motorists on Highway 24 near Yakima reported a man walking along the road in disoriented fashion. Witnesses later described him as appearing dazed, stumbling, or even possibly intoxicated, though no toxicology tests would ever confirm this. That evening, around 10:30 p.m., a vehicle struck him fatally in a hit-and-run. The impact was violent. His body was left on the side of the road, alone in the freezing winter air. He carried no identification. His clothing, while neat, held no wallet, no documents. To Washington authorities, he was simply a John Doe. Back in Amarillo, Karen filed a missing persons report. But no one connected the dots between the Texas attorney who had vanished and the unidentified man killed on the highway in Yakima. It would take over a decade before DNA evidence finally confirmed the two were one and the same. Let's return to Amarillo, to the house where David vanished. Investigators combed the property. No signs of forced entry. No blood. No overturned furniture. Nothing suggested a struggle. The sandwiches, laundry, and television painted a picture of interrupted routine, not violence. At the Yakima highway scene, evidence was equally frustrating. Tire marks indicated a high-speed strike. No driver ever came forward, and no witnesses captured the license plate. The man's body bore injuries consistent with a vehicle collision, blunt force trauma, multiple fractures, internal bleeding. His fingerprints were taken, but in 1993, national databases weren't yet as interconnected as they are today. The prints didn't trigger a match. Dental records were compared locally, but not to Texas files. Thus, the John Doe was quietly buried, awaiting the moment when forensic science would finally catch up. The Amarillo Police Department investigated David's disappearance but quickly hit dead ends. There were no ransom demands, no signs of robbery. His bank accounts remained untouched. His law firm had no missing funds or suspicious transfers. One theory speculated David may have left voluntarily, perhaps under stress, or for reasons he hadn't shared. Another posited that he may have been abducted, forced into a vehicle, and transported across states. But every lead fizzled. No arrests were ever made. In Washington, the John Doe case also languished. Investigators treated it as a tragic accident, cataloging it among the many unsolved hit-and-run deaths. Without ID, without a name, there was no path forward. The two cases, Amarillo's missing attorney and Yakima's John Doe, remained ships passing in the night. There was never a trial in the conventional sense. But years later, when forensic breakthroughs revealed the John Doe's identity as David Glenn Lewis, the court of public opinion became the arena for debate. Legal experts examined the timeline. How could a man vanish from his Texas home and appear in Washington within such a short window? One possibility: David flew. Airport's records from the period were incomplete, and it was possible he purchased a ticket under a different name. Another theory suggested he may have driven partway and hitched rides the rest of the way. But the logistics remained staggering: over 1,600 miles in under 36 hours, without leaving behind paper trails or witnesses. Family members argued passionately that David was not the type to abandon responsibilities. His wife Karen, in interviews, rejected the theory of voluntary disappearance. David loved his daughter more than anything. He wouldn't just walk away. Something happened to him. Something we don't understand. Meanwhile, skeptics pointed to the odd details: the left-behind watch and wedding ring, the seemingly staged normalcy of the house. Was David planning to leave, but conflicted? Without suspects, without evidence of foul play, no courtroom ever heard these arguments formally. The trial existed only in conversations, in investigative forums, in whispered theories that circulated for years. There was no verdict, no sentencing, because officially there was no crime that authorities could prove. David Glenn Lewis's death was ruled an unresolved hit-and-run accident. The driver who struck him was never found. Yet the absence of a verdict left a haunting vacuum, one that left his family and community with more questions than answers. For 11 years, the Lewis family lived in limbo, unsure if David was alive or dead. It wasn't until 2004, when fingerprints and improved forensic databases finally connected the Amarillo missing persons case to Yakima's John Doe, that the truth emerged. The revelation stunned both communities. In Amarillo, Friends struggled to process how their stable, dependable neighbor could have ended up dead in Washington. In Yakima, authorities revisited their old case files, reflecting on the lost opportunity for closure sooner. To this day, did David suffer a mental health crisis, leaving voluntarily and disoriented? Was he abducted, forced on a journey, and left to die far from home? Or was he the victim of something more complex, perhaps tied to his legal career, secrets buried beneath the surface? The case remains a mystery, a cautionary tale about the fragility of certainty. For Karen and Lauren, life moved forward, but never in the way they imagined. The empty chair at the dinner table, the unanswered questions, the years of silence all became permanent shadows of loss. What do you think really happened to David Glenn Lewis? Was it voluntary disappearance, abduction, or foul play? Do you believe authorities should have done more to connect the cases sooner? And what about the driver who hit him? Was it truly random, or part of something bigger? And that brings us to the end of this case, a story so disturbing it leaves you questioning how many others are suffering in silence. What are your thoughts on this case? Let me know in the comments. If this story shook you, there's more on the channel that dives into cases just as haunting. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that like button, and share this video. It helps keep these stories from being forgotten. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.